Hello, hi, happy Tuesday, and welcome to another episode of this. How are you? Is everything okay? Everything's mostly okay here, so I hope it's the same for you. So today, I wanted to talk about kids. Kids and horror, because, well, first of all, a lot of us horror fans were once kids. It's debatable on some other people. They seem like they were hatched from eggs, full growth, and they came out already liking certain kinds of horror. But for the most part, we started out as kids, and a lot of us now have kids. So it's kind of this weird landscape, especially in modern days, of not only being a horror fan, because a lot of us are kind of labeled as weirdos. It's more acceptable, it seems, to be a casual horror fan. You watch the occasional horror movie, but for the most part, you don't do that. So those of us who are creators, who read the books, watch the movies, really learn the sort of CVs of the directors and all of that, we're kind of labeled as weirdos. So there's the question of how we started out, and then there's also the question of, as parents, what do we do in sharing possibly our passion with our kids? So I wanted to talk first about how I came to be a horror fan, and I want to talk about what I do with my kids. So as a kid, my mom and my maternal grandmother were both big horror fans. My dad, not so much, but my mom and my grandma definitely were, and I was very, very close with my grandmother. Um, and I had, my home life was kind of not great. So anything to really bond with my mom, especially with one of my parents, it really didn't happen with my dad, but being able to bond with my mom was kind of a big deal. Being able to do something that was kind of relaxing and just being together was kind of a big deal when I was a kid. So when we would have the opportunity to sit on the couch together, eat snacks, and watch scary movies, because maybe my dad was on an overnight hunting trip, maybe he was out with the guys getting drunk. It was nice having those nights alone because the whole atmosphere of the house changed. It was much more relaxed. And just spending that time with my mom was really, I have nothing but good memories of it, watching scary movies. My mom introducing us to her favorite scary movies. And with my grandma had definitely had a different taste of scary movies. My mom is more, she was, not so much anymore, but she was more your traditional horror fan. She loved Stephen King. She loved all the Stephen King movies. She really liked the slashers. She's a big fan of Friday the 13th. She really loved monster movies. So all that kind of stuff, when we would sit and have these rare nights, it was stuff like that we watched. My grandma was more of a fan of, she liked a good haunting movie, but she was really a fan of like brutal, kind of, think Jack Ketchum, where it's not supernatural, it's people doing the horrible things. My grandma ate that shit up. So this was something that was instilled in me at a very, very young age. But I remember the first time I remember kind of being singled out as the horror fan, as possibly the weirdo. And I have a very clear memory of it. I was in kindergarten, and we were having one of those, we're all sitting on the floor, crisscross applesauce, our little hands folding in our laps, and we're talking about what our favorite movie is. And all the other kids are, their movies are Disney movies or something that they watched with their dad. And my turn came, and the movie that I picked was a movie called Lady in White. And it was a movie made in 1988, and I was probably in kindergarten in 1988, and I remember when I was little watching this movie and being blown away. It's a great ghost story, but it's also like, it is very much a horror movie, and there are some kind of brutal things that happen in it. So okay, it's a 1988 movie, but it takes place in the 60s, and it's sort of one of those things where you're kind of like Stand By Me, where we've got a modern day writer who's reliving an experience that happened when they were a kid. That's kind of what's happening in this. So I think I like to watch it because the main character is a child. And I still think it's a fantastic movie. If you've never seen it, watch it. It's a fantastic movie. It's a fantastic take on the lady in white folklore thing. Like, every town has a legend of the lady in white. She haunts this road, she haunts this bridge, things like that. And it's no different here. The guy who wrote this movie based it on a lady in white legend of a woman who is looking for her daughter in a park in Rochester, New York. This one's much more, the movie is much more visual because it takes place, the lady in white haunts a house on a hill that's like, the back of the house is on a cliff, like an oceanic cliff. It drops off into the ocean, makes a very dramatic, climactic scene. But it's a really good movie. But I remember, my little 5-year-old self being like, I love Lady in White, and the teacher kind of going, the ghost movie? Yeah, the ghost movie. Well, okay, next. And I remember being like, did I do something wrong? And because, my best friend liked the movie, and, my mom really liked the movie. I watched that movie every time I could. I've seen that movie dozens of times as a kid. So that's my story growing up. When I became a parent myself, you have kids and you want to share your interests with your children. You want to pass on certain parts of yourself onto your children. I don't know if it's ego or just wanting to have something in common with these little people you created, but it's just something you do. And as your kids grow older and you watch them, you do notice that there are some things that they got from you kind of through osmosis just by living with you. But there are also, the whole thing about your kids think everything that you're interested in is lame just because it's you. And that's very, very true. When I was a kid, if I knew someone who was a writer, I didn't. But if I did, that person would stand on some sort of godlike pedestal in my eyes. My kids are like, she likes books. I mean, if I were a big YouTuber, or if I were a video game designer, they might be impressed with me. That's a big might, like capital M, might. Otherwise, no, it's just what mom does and therefore is of no interest to them. And it's kind of been the same way with horror. My husband, he'll watch the movies, and he grew up watching, the very basic horror movies from when we were kids. He watched The Child's Play. He watched Nightmare on Elm Street. He watched those things, but he's not what I would call a horror nerd. He is more of a casual person. He doesn't cross the line into weirdo territory. So his interest in it is very casual. He watches stuff with me to spend time with me because he's a good husband like that. But the whole fandom thing, that's me, that's my thing. And my kids, they tend to take after their dad. They really love video games. They really love certain cartoons. That's more their thing, is more what their father is into. And I remember when my oldest was maybe 9 or 10 years old. And it finally got to the point where it was like, okay, they keep resisting certain levels of horror. I wasn't pushing anything on them, but it was, let's watch some kids movies. We love Ernest Scared Stupid in this house. My husband doesn't, but my kids and I love it. Nightmare Before Christmas, the really light stuff. But it was always just very much, I'll stop here. I have no interest in monsters. I have no interest. They were always lukewarm about Halloween, like getting costumes and going trick-or-treating. They didn't really love that either. What? So when my oldest got to be about 9 or 10 years old, I thought, when I was in kindergarten, much smaller than him, my favorite movie was Lady in White. And I remember my husband saying, let's watch it first just in case, because he knew, he very much aware that when I was a child, what I watched was not edited by the adults in my life. Horror and extreme violence were totally okay. Sex, not so much. But even then, still more sex than I would allow my kids to watch now. So he said to me, let's watch it first and just make sure. And there's no sex, there's no nudity in it. It's fine. It's a ghost story. It had been a long time. since I'd seen it. So we watched it again. My kids have never seen this movie. To this day, my oldest is 14. My youngest, he will turn 11 next week. So maybe the oldest might be interested in watching it. Maybe the youngest too. My youngest has specified to me, Mom, I will watch certain movies with you, but I don't like gore. So he doesn't like splattery stuff. He has no interest in watching it. He's never seen any, but he has specified that he has no interest in watching it, which is fine. I have no problem respecting that. But I think he could watch this now, but imagining these two boys in kindergarten, their little innocent selves, watching this movie, it's much more brutal and extreme because it deals with child murder. That there's a string of child murders going on in this town in this movie, and one of the things is the ghost of the lady in white's daughter. Every night she relives her murder, and you can see it. This boy watches it happen, and it's not extreme, but it's still disturbing. If you've never seen the movie, please watch it, but you'll also understand why, when I had the moment of showing my innocent little boy this movie, I went, nope. Maybe he's old enough now. I would try to run it by my youngest. My youngest loves he loves those Conjuring movies. And if, longtime watchers of this know my feelings on the Warrens, they know my feelings on these movies, but he loves them. So he has his own means of watching them. Maybe he would like this. I'm still a little iffy. Maybe he needs a couple more years. So my kids, are very about it. So when I talked about my Halloween movie list a couple videos ago and listed out, some of these movies are good for the whole family and some of these movies are just mom and dad only. Later that night, I've got the list on a clipboard so we can start crossing them off. I showed my kids and I said, so only make sure you pick ones that say good for the whole family. And my oldest son was looking and he said, no, wait a minute. I want to watch some of these classics. And they're even considered classics to me. These are all movies that came out before I was born. But there are certainly people who are still vibrant young people who were alive and could have seen these movies in theaters who are like, classics! But in this house, they're considered classics. So my oldest son had a problem with some of these movies being on the mom and dad only list. Like, he had a problem with Texas Chainsaw Massacre being on the adults only list. And he said, I want to watch this. It's a classic. He saw a YouTuber talking about it. A big, YouTuber talking about it, and he said, this person said I should watch it. And it's like, oh, well, their word's obviously better than your mother's, so okay. So we watched it. My youngest son had no interest again, and we didn't push the issue, but we told the oldest, we were like, you'd be surprised how not gory this movie is. You're going to be surprised by what you see. And it was incredible watching him watch this movie. I've seen this movie 1,000 times. It's still fantastic. I love this movie. But watching him watch it, watching the scene where the girl and her brother in the wheelchair are kind of running through the brush and Leatherface pops out and attacks the brother in the wheelchair, my son jumped off the couch. It scared the crap out of him. But he kept saying throughout, this movie is notoriously low budget. And I guess the YouTube video he watched about it pointed out this movie is notoriously low budget. So I think he was expecting low quality. And I think that's something that people need to remember, like newcomers to horror need to remember about the movies. These classics are that, and I talk about the renegade spirit in horror a lot. You can do a lot on low budget if you understand horror storytelling. And I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a great example of that. But my son kept saying, I'm really surprised by how high quality this looks, by how good everything looks, by how good the actors are. And you get a new appreciation for that watching it through new eyes and seeing, his more technical take on it. But he very much enjoyed this movie. So we've been making our way through the list. He watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre with us. The youngest did not. What was another one they watched for the first time? Pet Sematary. Both of them watched it with us. And this and The Mist, they both watched it with us. These are kids who, when I am dead and someone is giving a eulogy over me, my kids will be talking through it. They won't be giving the eulogy. They'll be having a conversation talking over someone eulogizing me. They will talk through anything. It is impossible to watch a movie with them and catch the whole thing because they talk nonstop. With Pet Sematary and The Mist, there were moments of such silence you could have heard a pin drop. In The Mist, it was that end part. They really enjoyed The Mist. They really enjoyed the creatures, and they really got they understood this is a great horror film. With Pet Sematary, there were just, it was a lot of, because there's a lot of going there with the movie Pet Sematary. With the book, woo, we really go there. But there's a lot of, they've come up in a time where you don't show dead children in TV. You don't show a resurrected dead child killing people, cutting through people's Achilles heel. My husband didn't watch it with us. He can't make it through Pet Sematary because of that Achilles heel scene. And so we watched it when he was off playing Dungeons and Dragons one night, and I told them, your father can't watch this movie because of one scene, and I won't tell you what scene, you'll have to guess. And they knew instantly. They were like, oh, that's why Dad can't watch this movie. So they had a really good time watching these movies, really getting the thrill of horror, and it was nice to share them with them. What else have we watched? Over the Garden Wall, of course, that Cartoon Network miniseries, it's just fantastic. My youngest and I are always singing the songs from it. It's become, this will be a mandatory every year watch for us. Ernest Scared Stupid, of course, we watched. The Blair Witch Project, my oldest was very interested in watching it. My husband actually hadn't seen it, which was weird because we were that age. We were teenagers when the Blair Witch Project came out, and we were there for the PR blitz of this is actually real. This is actually real. We were friends with people who, even after seeing it, were like, this is real. This really happened. This is found footage. And if you weren't there when that happened, if you weren't there during that media blitz, during, oh, is this actually real? Wait a minute. Like, even the smartest people in the room were kind of going, wait a minute, is it? Everybody had a moment where it was like, wait, what? So that's why the movie was a big deal. And I hadn't seen it in a very, very long time. I watched it maybe twice before. I know I've seen it more than once, but it's not my favorite movie. But again, it was one of those things, watching them watch it. And also revisiting some things. There were parts of that movie that were actually, that's a great moment in horror. But watching my husband being really sucked into it, watching my oldest son being really into it. My youngest got bored. He thought it was boring. But my oldest and my husband, it was really interesting watching them really sucked into the story, really wondering, where is this going to end? Are they going to find her? Is she going to find them? What's going to happen? There's a great build of suspense in this movie that I'd forgotten about. So that was nice to revisit. We still have a lot to get through. We're not going to finish this. I mean, I don't understand how we can. But there were definitely some on here that my oldest son was offended, where I said, you can't. And he's like, I want to. So I had originally said the first two Friday the 13th movies were off limits. And mostly it's because, there are some gory scenes, but there's the sex thing. And at his age, it's very uncomfortable watching sex scenes with your parents in the room. And I told him that. And, he was like, I still, it's a classic, Mom. I want to see it. I want to see the Jason movies. Okay, you don't know the first one doesn't have Jason as the main killer, but okay. You understand? You still want to do it? Okay, at your age, I think we can do this. So we're going to get to that. He wants to watch the first Nightmare on Elm Street. And I explained to him, this movie is really scary when you first see it, especially at your age. Are you sure? You know, I try to do the mom thing and be like, here's the deal with this. Do you want to rethink that? And on a couple, he's been like, oh, okay, maybe I'll wait a little bit for that one. But he's been very firm on a few of these. He really wants to kind of bulk up on these classics. So, okay, I'm not going to stop you. Great. We'll have something to talk about, you know, besides love of shark movies. He's the one that really loves the shark movies. We watched Shark Week together, and Jaws is on the Halloween movie watching list. We watched it 2 weeks ago, maybe last week. Always and Forever. Fantastic monster movie. But yeah, how did you, so the thing that I want to sort of end with is asking you, how did you begin as a horror fan? And if you're a parent or aunt or uncle, if you have children that you hang out with and influence, did you make the choice to share that passion with them? And if you did, how did you go about introducing it? Because it is a weird decision, because, you know, even if as we're seen as weirdos by society, we can also be seen as people who can be harmful to children by sharing that passion. And we don't want to upset our children. Like, people who want to make decisions about our tastes and sharing our tastes with our kids, when we're not hurting them, they can go straight to hell. I'm not hurting my kids. They make the decisions, and I make double sure they know what they're getting into before we make that decision. But this is something I want to share with my kids if they're ready. And the oldest specifically is really amenable to saying, yeah, I think I want to do this. So yeah, I'm opening that door slowly for him. But how do you handle maybe judgmental people? How do you handle getting the kids interested? I mean, I think it's an interesting topic, because some people, it's just easy. Their kids want to do everything they want to do, and they just kind of naturally become horror fans. But my kids are very much like, it's a mom thing. I've become the antithesis to cool to my kids, which I think is normal. You know, you ought to hear some of the stuff they say to their dad. I think it's normal, but it's been, like, I was very surprised by my oldest saying, no, I want to watch some of these movies, because this is a first from him, very much a first from him. And it's been really nice watching some of these movies with him, and then having a conversation with him afterwards where we talk about it, and he talks about the parts that he really thought were effective. And, you know, sometimes because you've seen these movies 1,000 times, you forget those little beats. And when someone is going into it new, they catch it. And when they point it out, you're like, oh yeah, wow. I really wish I could go back and watch some of these movies for the first time again, with some of the insight that I have now, and really be able to see why it went down as a classic, why it still exists as a great movie now, like sometimes like 50 years later. It's because of the skill and storytelling that's put into it. So that'll be it for me. Sound off below on how you did it, how you became a horror fan, and if you pass it on to any kids. I'm really interested in hearing it. And that'll be it for me this week. It was a kind of blabby episode. I'm sorry if you don't like those. But I will be back next week, hopefully, barring any disasters with homeschooling, because we're having problems over here. And I will see you all next week. Thank you for watching, and I hope the universe is treating you all very well. Bye! All remote, turn it off, please. Seriously. Okay, we're going to go to my happy place.